Hello everyone. It's lovely to be back in the Fusebox, which I love. It's a great space and an amazing project. Talking about social media for startups and social media marketing for startups and innovators, which is a massively broad subject. In fact, breaking it down, we could take each part as a separate talk. My credentials for this is I started one of the first social media practices in a digital agency, iCrossing over the way back in 2006, and I actually called it content and social media marketing. And that was me hedging my bets because nobody at the time really knew whether social media was going to turn into anything or not, which seems ridiculous in hindsight because it's so important today. Brilliant Noise is a startup. We're about 3 years in to our journey now. There's about 30 of us, and we're working with brands like Porsche, the FT, Microsoft Mobile, which is where Andy Keach had to shoot off to. And as I'll talk about, the funny thing is that for social media marketing, it completely scales. Everything scales from the individual up to the large organizations. And the funny thing about talking to big organizations about social media and innovation indeed, is they're all trying to act like you. They're all trying to act like startups and like innovators, and they're trying to undo their kind of systems that have been built up around big advertising and broadcast. And sometimes that's hilarious, as we can all see every now and again. If every few weeks a brand screws up and does a hashtag about ask us anything. Oh, why does everyone hate you? Or et cetera, and that's all hilarious. But that's all part of the process of brands trying to act more like startups. And the book that I wrote was all about individuals, and it wasn't one of those like brand new type things. It was just about personal reputation and what we need to do to live on the web. But the thing about the web and about social media and about networks is it all scales. It's the same rules for an individual as it is for a large organization if you want to succeed, if you want to use it to your advantage in business. And there was a phrase actually Jim and I bounced around a lot when we were working at iCrossing. Jim Byford over those, the researcher in residence here, for those of you who don't know him at Fusebox. We talked constantly, had this mantra of be useful, which was incredibly radical at the time. It has now entered the mainstream in terms of marketing. I was at the Forrester CMO Summit week before last, which is kind of where all the European CMOs from big brands go to hang out. And it was all like, hey guys, we've got this idea, right? Let's be useful to consumers. Let's do things they actually want instead of just telling them to buy stuff. And I was like, yeah. And I actually looked up and saw the first blog post that we'd written about that in 2006. And I didn't post it because that would have just been mean and spiteful. But that be useful thing overshadows the ethos that we have at Brilliant Noise, and that I think is the correct response to social media and digital and all of the things that are going on at the moment, which is there's so much complexity, things are changing so quickly. It's not the platforms and the technology, it's not Facebook or Twitter or WhatsApp or whatever that you need to focus on, it's the customer. The customer is the North Star. What are they doing? It's a really simple question. What are they doing? What do they want to do? Not how can I reach them through X or Y. Are they there? Do they want to hear from me there? I mean, that's the whole question hanging over this multi-billion dollar company of Facebook, is whether anybody actually wants to hear from advertisers on there. And I gave a talk at the IAB not so long ago and suggested that nobody wants to hear from advertisers on Facebook, and there was a gentleman from Facebook in the audience who didn't take too kindly to that. But, find a different business model. This is being recorded, right? That the customer first. Customer is the North Star. What are they doing? That answers everything. And that doesn't change whether you're a B2B, whether you're a boutique clothes shop, whether you're a cafe in 5 Ways, all of which are now doing social media marketing, all of which, there's a cafe opened across the road from me, Tilt, up in 5 Ways. Lovely. First I heard of it was on Twitter as it started talking to the other businesses in 5 Ways, and kind of plugged itself into the community before it even opened. Social media marketing, just being where its customers want. My other favourite Brighton example of social media and digital marketing, I think, is Pegs & Son, the ridiculously overpriced and well-curated shop that I'm addicted to in the lanes. If you're a fan of what they do and the clothes that they pick out, they'll hit you on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and email, and I'm on all of those feeds, and I just lap it all up because I'm a massive fan of the kind of some of the things that they pick out. Not for everyone. That's not social media marketing to the masses. It's just to the people who really love what they do. They're being where their customers are, and they're giving them what they want. So the thing with it is then to think about earning advocacy, and that means like everything, and I'll talk about this a little bit later on, but everything in social media and in digital is about being so useful and so focused on your customer that they start telling other people about you. It's not the sale, it's not the review, it's the making people so satisfied or so excited about your brand that they'll tell other people about it. And the bit that we don't need to talk about really with startups, this is what we talk about with big brands, is transformative digital. Is that if you do those two things, if you're focusing on the customer and you're actually building all of your communications and marketing around what they need and what they want rather than what you're trying to sell, then it changes how the organization works. You have to start thinking about why you're spending 95% of your budget on advertising, which some brands still do, when most consumers couldn't give a fig about brands or about advertising. There's a lovely article, by the way, if you want evidence around that, or if you just kind of agree with that sentiment and you want to feel massively vindicated, called The Twilight of the Brands by James Surowiecki. I'm probably mispronouncing that, but I've only ever seen it written down. The Twilight of the Brands, about how brands were something that were useful when choice was limited, but now that choice is unlimited and that people can compare things, brands aren't so useful anymore. Anyway, social media is evolving and changing all the time. You just got onto Instagram and Vine, well done, but it's old news now. WhatsApp's definitely where it's at, or if you're in another market, there's another thing that it's all about. Marketing, what marketing means is completely being rethought at the moment, completely changing. Startups, as I say, is what large companies want to be, and innovators is what everybody wants to be. And all of this is about change. And the business context for social media marketing and all of your businesses and all businesses is about massive change in the market. And it's all, I think, boils down to leadership. And I want to explain what I mean by that. You'll be glad to hear. When I've been really interested in leadership recently, and when people study it, they break it down into three things. And it is applicable whether there's one of you in your business or 700,000. Leadership is about, first of all, leading yourself and being really, really clear about how effective you are, what your strengths and weaknesses are, how you work with technology and digital, leading others, so building teams that can use this stuff really well, and then leading an organization. But it's, with all of this social media marketing and all of this, the reason that I talk about leadership is because when I've been working with coaches and psychologists who talk to leaders and try and talk them through things, they run courses for whole bunches of people who are going to be leaders, and they want a kind of a prescription, a set of rules laid out for them about what a leader looks like. And the thing is that it's the same for leaders of organizations as it is for startups. When you get to that point, there are no rules. You have to invent it yourself. You have to invent what being a leader means. And all of you as startups and innovators have to invent what being a business today means. There's not a template, there's not a case study. If you want to go and read growth hacking articles and follow the SEO top tips, good luck to you, but it's tactical, it's not strategic, you're not taking advantage of the full opportunity. I don't think there are any shortcuts. There's no just run a Facebook competition and get a bunch of likes. Even big brands have realized that that's a nonsense idea these days. There's no mass way of doing this. It has to be invented business by business. And I think it's about a process of inventing what your business means in social media, what it means to customers, grafting really, really hard, and then repeating that, reinvention. And how that connects with leadership is, for me, is this quote from this incredibly dapper gentleman. He's Warren Bennis. He founded the field of leadership studies back in the 50s when he looked like this. He's now 92. But I found that photo on his website and just thought that was really cool. He said, for leaders of any organization, it's about reinventing yourself constantly and then reinventing the organization. And that's as true for a startup as it is for Coca-Cola or Nike. There's no room to stand still for anyone. And it's that responsibility that I think that comes through, that you can't turn up and get a list of 10 rules about how to do social media marketing and walk away. The challenge is to look at what your customers are doing, look at the opportunities to contact them and serve them in digital, and invent what that means for you. And I just wanted to say something about fear as well, because I left employment and started my own company 3 years ago, and it was terrifying. So congratulations to all of you who've done that at various stages, because it's a ridiculously terrifying thing to do. And then actually talking to people about what you do and putting your product out there is a terrifying thing to do. And then actually asking a customer if what you're selling is at all relevant to them is a terrifying thing to do. But once you've done all of those things, it's really easy. Once you've done it, you wonder why you didn't do it before, because it's so valuable and so interesting and so exciting. But the thing I wanted to say about fear as well is that in terms of competitors and large organizations and incumbents in markets, you are what they fear. And the point is not to try and emulate them, because digital change is coming from all directions, and they know that, and they're terrified. I think for startups and innovators, the message is don't act big. Don't try and ape what's already there. Everyone wants to be like you. And you is having the freedom to define what this means. Not to say, right, this means that I run a marketing department like this and I do social media like Nike does it or like Coke does it. I do it in my own way, and I do it according to the values and the approach and the ethos of my company and the purpose of my company. And that, I think that purpose and that strategy, I know this isn't a session about strategy, it's about marketing, but unless you're really, really clear about your purpose and what your company's for and why it's unique in the marketplace, then it's always going to be really, really hard to do social media marketing. Just one other word on innovation as well. I read this amazing book recently called The Second Machine Age. Has anyone read that here? So it's probably the best book I've read this year, and I'd highly recommend it. It's by a couple of guys from MIT, and it's arguing the case that the pace of change in technology, the disruption that's destroying and reinventing media industries and all sorts of industries at the moment, is actually speeding up, and it's going to get faster. But I won't go into that. Read it seriously. But one of the things about innovation is that I thought a key insight from it was that they say the constraint on the economy's growth becomes the economy's ability to go through all of the potential recombinations of technologies and ideas and find the truly valuable ones. All of the key sort of technologies and bits and bobs for the companies of the future are lying around. Just nobody's put them together yet. You know, Airbnb, for instance, is an amazing, innovative startup. The idea of a trust-based marketplace had been there since 1998 in eBay, and Owners Direct had been trading since early 2000s, but it was 10 or 12 years later that actually got together and became something which, believe me, is on the agenda of every travel company in the world as a major threat to how you do business. Completely reimagining what it means to go and get a hotel room, what it means to go and stay somewhere. It's really, these things can feel like obvious case studies sometimes, but it's really worth going back to them and thinking deeply about just how radical some of these new companies are that have come through, and remembering that the challenge to create real value through marketing and through what you do in startups is to be as radical as that and to be as ambitious as that. I won't dwell on the innovator's dilemma. I just wanted to share something else from a large company point of view. Since innovation was in the title of this talk, I thought I should say some things about innovation. But has anyone read the innovation report from the New York Times? If you're interested in innovation, it's one of the most fascinating things you can take a look at. It was an internal report drafted by the top management at the New York Times in March, and someone, as they got fired, helpfully posted it on Scribed. So all 92 pages of the deep analysis of why this gorgeous building here is in massive trouble, and why journalism and why photojournalism and why all of these things are being disrupted and challenged is their thoughts are all in it, and it's an amazing primer on innovation. It's a really valuable document, and it's out there free on the web. But one of the things that they do in there is they talk about disruption and what that means, and they describe what I was just talking about as the innovator's dilemma really, really clearly. Let's see if I've got a clearer diagram. Yeah, so talk about a company innovates, it's a low quality product, they get out there, and then as they scale, as they grow, they sustain the innovation, they become bigger and bigger. And then that's the minimum customer need. They go past that and then they become a serious company. And the thing about, they say about disruptive innovations, at the, explaining this themselves at the New York Times, is there comes a point when the quality of the disruptive product rises and gets better and better. It doesn't seem like a threat at first, it seems like nothing. And then it reaches a point where actually it meets the customer need, and at that point the incumbent that has scaled and grown huge and has a skyscraper in Manhattan full of journalists falls off the radar. And the big threat, the big disruptive threat they're thinking about there is BuzzFeed. Does anybody like BuzzFeed? Good, see, it's a lot of fun. I don't particularly, but it's fascinating. And all of a sudden, BuzzFeed spent a few years perfecting its social content platform. Low quality, a bunch of lists about cats. Is that a threat to the New York Times? No. Until they get it right, until they get that distribution platform right. And they don't need any trucks and any newspapers, and they don't need however many floors are in that huge skyscraper full of journalists. They've got a floor somewhere, and all of a sudden, they're absolutely the threat to the New York Times, to the Times, to the Financial Times, to every newspaper out there, because they perfected the distribution method. And now they've got 2 journalists in Syria, and they're hiring journalists for the financial section, left, right, and center. And all of a sudden, that cheap, crappy product in the corner that everyone was laughing at is going to take you down. That's you. You need to be BuzzFeed, yeah, right. You need to get that minimum viable product out there. And anybody who's working in the Fusebox project at the moment has been looking at lean and getting lean canvases out there and just getting stuff out there and seeing the customer feedback and seeing what works. That's the business model. And it's not a theory, and it's not a nice idea. Read the New York Innovation Times report and see one of the giants of the world of journalism quaking in its boots about the idea of little startups coming up on its heels. It's been seeing it for anyway. But the other thing about BuzzFeed that's relevant to us today, talking about social media marketing, is what they've done. They've perfected the social media, well, not perfected, but they've built much more than a minimum viable product of a social content platform. They have built a way of getting content out there so it's shared. They don't advertise. They don't do pay-per-click. They don't make people pay for content. They just try and build content that people will share and find ways to make content shareable. And I'd say that in social media marketing, that I said like as a strategic goal, it's about customer advocacy. But in social media marketing, the best thing that you can do is think of a customer need, meet it with a piece of content that is so amazing, they'll share it with someone else. And if they're not sharing it with someone else, or it's not interesting enough, then it's probably the same as everything else out there. Creating a bit of content or an idea that's quite similar to other stuff out there, or that only sort of meets a consumer need, is you're on a hiding to nothing, because then at that point you are competing with BuzzFeed, and they're better at it than you. With all due respect, they're better at it than me. I think for our clients and for all of you, we try and think about emulating BuzzFeed, but not creating a content business. It's not your core strength. It's not our core strength. It's not what most businesses are about. But it is about the customer, and how do you create a platform, a way of communicating that's all about reaching the customer with the content that they need. And this is Yves Behar from Fuse Project, amazing design agency, who create Jawbone and things like one laptop per child. And Jim and I saw him talk in San Francisco a few years ago. I only realised when I was putting this in, I've got this laser on here. No, it doesn't show on that screen. That he's like kind of basically the startup Zoolander. because technology is so hot right now. But he really does look like that. And he also does technology for people who aren't good looking. That's really cruel to take be fine with it. But I love his quote about advertising is the price that companies pay for being unoriginal. And I think that's a really challenging statement, especially when Jawbone does advertise. But anyway, let's get down to brass tacks. Let's get down to the toolbox, the marketing toolbox. As I said, what I'm not going to give you is a bunch of top tips about getting Facebook fans. It's bullshit. I'm going to show you the tools that we use to think about our marketing and get to the right answers, the right questions to ask. So social media is just part of digital. And actually, it's better to think about it in the round. And I'll share these slides, so don't worry if you can't see it. But it's thinking about how social media connects with things like SEO, with your content, which is absolutely crucial, how it connects with UX, PR, and even some paid media as well to boost getting stuff out there sometimes. But having a clear strategy is the most important thing. And then the second most important thing I'd say is having a feedback loop, is having data, is having measurement to see what's going on out there. It's so valuable to get consumer insights, and what they're using, what they're looking at, how they're sharing is about the best way that you can improve your marketing. Did I mention the customer? Advertising is an unwelcome caller, I often think, in this mix. Let me just to reinforce that point of it's not about 10 SEO tips that are going to get. This is a diagram we drew years ago, and it actually came to pass of the story of SEO marketing. And everyone thought that marketing was about SEO and about gaming the system with Google. And what happened was this line through the middle is Google getting better and better and better at its algorithm. And then what would happen, this green line is SEO being better than the Google algorithm and being able to get their insurance company or shoe shop or whatever higher up in the rankings. And then Google would update their algorithm, and it'd dip, and everyone would have a massive panic in the SEO industry, and there'd be huge discussions on forums. And then they'd beat it again, and they'd be able to game the system again. They'd work out the thing. And then Google would bring out another update, and it'd dip again. But that was the game for about 10 years. And then Google won. Who knew that a company with all of those resources could beat the entire SEO industry? But yes, it eventually happened, and now it's really, really hard to game Google. You can do it as a hygiene factor. You can be seen in Google, but gaming the system is always going to be a short-term solution. And what Google actually wants is for people to be useful to their customers, so it can put the most useful content at the top of the page. And if people have been doing that all along, then they'd have had a long-term bet, and the ones that did are winning large. And this kind of sentiment continues with social media. John Wilshire, who's a great strategist and planner, lives over in Plumpton. I've put a link to his presentation, but Google it as well, it'll come straight up. He came up with this lovely phrase called fracking the social web, which is what he said big brands were doing with their million-like campaigns and their endless competitions and the, hey, it's Friday, why don't you like this picture of our kittens? What's your favourite product that we put out? Unbelievable. Like anyone wants that in life, apart from a few anyway. So fracking the social web, that's what big brands have been doing during the early phase of social media marketing, a lot of them. And then they're realizing that it's a real loser, that it really doesn't go anywhere. It's not like advertising. They can't measure it in reach. They have to measure it in customer delight and satisfaction and people bonding with the brand and repeat purchasing, not just receiving more messages from Brand Central. So this is what you as innovators and startups never have to go through that process. Because if you're obsessed with the customer from the start, then you're building everything around them from the start. And I'm going to offer a few tools that we use at Brilliant Noise to think about this. And this is practically how to think about what your customer is doing online, what they're doing in social media, and then work out what you can do to help them and to be present in the places where they go. And this comes from McKinsey. It's a very useful model, and it replaced that idea of the sales funnel. Has anyone heard of the sales funnel kind of metaphor? So that's what marketing used to be, was the idea of a funnel, and you chuck in attention at the top, and then you push the consumer through the funnel, and you get fewer and fewer each stage until you get a sale at the end. and that was known as the funnel, and that was marketing for about 50 years. And it is still widely used, but to quote one of my clients, that was discredited 10 years ago, and it is shameful if you're using that metaphor still. The way to think about consumer need is to follow them through their journey from consideration, which companies am I going to use, who should I talk to about my contract, or whose widget should I buy, through to evaluation. Okay, I'm down to 2 or 3. It's probably that one, to the point of purchase, which is where the funnel used to end, and then nobody cared in marketing about what happened after people bought. Fuck it, I'm going to go and get some more people to buy stuff. But actually, what people think of now is this idea that post-purchase is actually the really precious moment. It's the social media marketing. It doesn't end at the moment someone buys things. It really carries on. It carries on to help them enjoy the product. If they have problems with it, support them. It carries on through the bonding when they're sort of beginning to really become a customer going. Like if you imagine buying a piece of software, for instance, and I'm sure there are a couple of people doing software startups here. I bought the Ember app from Real Mac, a Brighton company, not so long ago. At the consideration stage, I was kind of thinking I could use a way of managing images on my computer better. At the evaluation stage, it was like, well, I've got this and it kind of works, but it would be nice if I used Evernote or used that. And I saw a case study of a friend of mine talking about how good the product was. So that pushed me through to purchase. Then it didn't work. But I got in touch with them on Twitter, and they fixed it immediately, and in fact invited me around to have a chat about it. Oh boy, did I bond, and really understood the product, and now I'll recommend it. And I'm recommending it to all of you now. It's marketing in action. But now, on the advocacy loop, if they've got a product, they've got a task list product as well. If I'm in the market for that, I'm much more likely not to even bother researching. I'll just take theirs because they're pretty good, and that service was amazing. So the idea is like all of these stages, the question to ask is, what is your customer, what's the buyer, or whoever you're trying to reach, what are they considering? Are they searching? Are they looking on forums, on LinkedIn? Are they talking to people? How can you be present there? Evaluation, this is where loads of brands fall down. It's like, okay, evaluation, I'll use cameras as an example. I think like Nikon's website for comparing features and things, really rubbish. And so when I'm trying to get to the point of comparing features, if I can't compare the products and get the information that I need, then maybe I drop out of that loop and maybe I don't bother. Whereas if they delivered the right content around that, with the right customer case studies and all the rest of it, that would have worked really well. So that's not even about social, that's just about having decent information at that stage of the journey. Past purchase, enjoy, bond, advocate. And I'll just show you, I'm going to skip through that because I want to carry on with this, talking about this model, but this is another way of thinking about it, and this is kind of back of a fag packet whiteboard exercise that we go through with our clients and for ourselves as well, for our customers. So we look at those consider, evaluate, buy, bond, advocate stages, and we say what are the channels or what are the types of social media that they're using at each of these stages. So this is an example for buying a flight, for instance, to New York. At the consideration stage, they're searching, going out and looking at what's out there, who's got flights to New York, and they're also looking in social media, perhaps asking, they're aware of what people have said about their experience with Virgin or BA. And then at the evaluation stage, they'll, again, be out there on search engines. So are we present in the search engine when they search for my product, when they search for my brand? Is the content coming up? Maybe they're looking at price comparison at that stage as well, and social media. At the point of purchase, they're just on the website and maybe flitting between that and a price comparison engine on this particular example. So we better be present in both of those stages. But then when it gets through to the bonding, they just want support from us. And the advocacy stage, when they're actually saying good things about us, that's all in social media. And we've got to get out there, listen to that feedback, also listen to that questioning and support feedback, and use that to improve the product and also improve their experience there. So that's the planning tool that kind of makes that real. And another way to do it is just to put all of those stages up there and stand there with your team, or even better with a customer, and say, what happens here? What are you looking at? Are you using social there? What kind of stuff do you need? I'm And I also thought I'd share this model that we use for planning social media and social content programs. When you're small, it's really, really easy just to get on with this stuff if you've got enough time, if you can prioritize it above everything else, like developing the product and drawing up markets and actually delivering stuff to clients. You can just get on with it and kind of do it by feel. But if you want to scale or grow at all, or if you want some sanity, then you kind of need a structure for thinking about how am I doing this, how am I doing with social media marketing. And this is the, being in marketing, we're kind of addicted to alliteration, so it's all the pus. So purpose, what's the content for, who's it for, principles, and I'll come on to these in just a second with a couple of examples, but this is how we're going to work with the customer. This is how we're actually going to make this happen. The platforms that you're going to use to create and share, and this is really, really important, the platforms and processes. I know this sounds like this isn't as exciting as how to run a Facebook competition, but if you get these right, then you're spending less time on it, you're getting stuff out faster. If you're thinking about how to use Hootsuite, for instance, which I'd highly recommend as a really low-cost way of getting a message out across different platforms, reaching people specifically, or email, or whatever you're using to reach people. And then actually the people you're going to need and the time that you're going to need to execute on this stuff. And then, as I say, the performance, having measures in place to create a feedback loop so that you're improving all of the time. These are all the elements that you need in place. Often what we see when we talk to companies is that massive bits of these are missing. And the big mistake that people make when they're trying to scale it and go beyond just actually having done something at all is that they'll just focus on getting stuff out the door and bunging stuff on the web, mud against the wall, which, I think is not the end of the world as long as you're measuring it and learning from it. That's fair enough to be a bit chaotic. But if you haven't got a purpose and you haven't got performance, then you don't really know whether it's working, and you're going to kind of lose heart, lose momentum. So in terms of drawing up a purpose, what we talk about is what's the purpose of our content, what's the purpose of the work that we do in social media, and being really, really clear and urgent and compelling about why that's important to us and our relationship with the consumer. It's a big brand example, but it was drawn up when it was a small brand. But Nike's purpose as a whole organization is one that they've then translated into how they do social media and content. And Nike really is one of the brands that does social media very, very well compared to a lot of them. But they're kind of bringing inspiration to every athlete in the world was the mission of the company at the start, and that continues. That drives all of their social media work and all of their content work. And having some principles, I think, is really useful as well. And I'll give you a couple of examples. And this sounds like theoretical stuff, but very, very quickly, as soon as you start doing social media marketing and trying to meet consumers' needs, you run across problems, you run across why are we doing this instead of that. And you need some principles to be able to frame the arguments. So we try and draw up principles that are guiding, that frame arguments and discussions, and that can be kind of mantra-like, things that people can just quote at each other all of the time to settle arguments about why we do this. And I'll show you a lovely set of principles from the Government Digital Service, which, despite being a large organisation, acts like a startup and is it's brought a lot of agility into government processes. But their mantras and their principles are absolutely amazing. These are actually design principles, but you could use them just as easily for social media and for content. And their number one principle is start with needs, and then they've got a little asterisk, user needs, not the government department needs. Because up until that point, that was how everything was done. It's like, what do we need to tell people instead of what they need? And then they've got lovely principles like doing less, designing with data, do hard work to keep it simple, iterate and then iterate again. All of these could be easily applied to social media marketing. In terms of platforms, this is a slide which, when sent around the slides, is probably worth grabbing because Lauren, who does our social content, leads our social content at Brilliant Noise, drew up of her favourite platforms for creating and distributing content to consumers. you'll notice that there's not a Facebook or a Twitter or a WhatsApp in here. That's irrelevant because that's what's specific to the consumer in the space. This is all about the processes that are used for thinking about what content is the right content to create and reach the consumer. What's the fastest way to create it and create a workflow around content that's fast and efficient, because it can take up loads of time to create quality content. How to publish it and how to amplify it. And I think the one bit that I'd emphasize as well is around the source, which is really useful for everybody here. Around the source is using social listening tools like Brandwatch or like Topsy or whatever you can lay your hands on. There's free and low-cost versions as well. Bookmarking and using whatever tools you can to listen to the consumer and find out their needs. Just in terms of processes, again, it's worth breaking it down into workflows, and this is quite a complex looking diagram, but essentially just boil it down to how are we sourcing the content, how are we finding stuff that's going to be useful to people, how are we getting it out there, and how are we measuring it. And it is absolutely unbelievable how many brands still don't measure anything to do with the impact of content, and that really is the bit that can help you get ahead faster. This is a kind of organogram of a social media and content team. The thing is that there may only be a few of you in your company, but all of these roles are kind of necessary and maybe need to be filled by just one person. But someone needs to be thinking strategically. Somebody needs to be a community manager who's dealing with problems. Again, Real Mac, they've got one person on that full time, and there's only 8 of them. They've got one person full-time in communities answering questions, helping people out, helping them bond with the product, helping them decide whether it's the right one for them, having some data in there that's feeding back into them, and working with professional journalists, professional content creators to create some of your work. Sometimes you're going to need to work with partners on that. I'm not going to dwell on metrics other than to say that you need to link them back to objectives. Once you've got that purpose, how are you going to measure that? The one measure we use, above all others, although we'll use lots of tactical metrics around likes and shares. Actually, so if you're in a B2B business like we are, we sell to businesses, not to individuals. I'll be honest, like the metrics to do with the web and the tweets are interesting, but I don't obsess about them at all. And in fact, like I don't mind really, really small amounts of views on an article or a really small amount of shares. It's lovely when something does go viral. One of our consultants, Beth Granter, is always writing amazing posts about network mapping and measurement and putting them out there. And she just, everyone spreads those through their networks really fast. There's a real hunger for that. But our marketing approach is it's for our customers first. So if I get a couple of emails back from my customers saying that was useful, job done. Because if I can persuade all of my customers that we've got stuff worth sharing and that we're worth talking about, job done. So much cheaper than trying to compete in Brand Republic or in Campaign magazine for a bit of attention with all the other agencies out there. So much more important to think about the customers. So our most important metric at Brilliant Noise is Net Promoter Score. And if you've not heard of that, it's really worth looking at. It's this one single question that you ask people, which is, how likely are you out of 10 to recommend us to a friend or a colleague? And it's a really emotional and rational question. It's like if you score a 9 or a 10, then they're a promoter, and anything below that, they're kind of either passive, or if it's really low, then they're a detractor, and you better sort that out. But that's our most important metric. And the other things are kind of tactical and interesting from a content point of view. But I don't worry about scale. I try and worry about customer delight most of all. So going back to the thing at the beginning, you have to invent your own way of doing social media marketing. And we're going to do questions, and I can be as tactical as you like and talk about platforms and tools and processes and stuff. But really, they're not going to be the same for everyone in this room. But the one thing that will be the same is that how you can succeed in digital and social media is by being genuinely useful to people, especially your customers, obsessing about customers, and having the objective not of selling, if you remember that loop, but the whole objective of that is to push them around to the point where they're an advocate and where they never leave and where they're telling everyone about you. and all of that, as I say, is transformative, but only if you're an incumbent. One of the things that I didn't have time to talk about today, and perhaps do another time, but when it comes to being an innovator and working with social media, there's a huge amount you can do with even more pals. Obviously didn't finish that sentence. We published a series of books for Nokia, or Microsoft Mobile as it has become about 3 weeks ago, all around how to work with digital tools to work more smartly. I worked with Jim on the first one, which was Design Your Day, and it brings like some ideas from neuroscience and design thinking into how you work more effectively with technology and social media. And actually social media tools aren't just about getting publicity and getting sales and delighting customers. They can actually help you to work a lot faster if you incorporate them into your working routine. And these books are all online and they're all free. So do go and take a look at them if you're interested in that side of things. And they'll give you pals, whatever that is. So I hope that was useful. It's difficult to address everybody's needs specifically, but those are the things that I think are important in social media marketing. I hope some of them will inspire you to do some reading, have some conversations, but most of all that they'll inspire you to obsess about your customer and look at what they're doing in social media and use that to get feedback from them and more sales, hopefully. So thank you.